You just got a raise. Your paycheck is bigger than it's ever been. And somehow, weirdly, you still feel broke. Not poor in the way you were 5 years ago. Poor in a new way. A moving target way. You upgraded your apartment. You upgraded your car. You told yourself this time it would finally feel like enough. And the feeling of almost enough followed you the entire time, quiet and persistent, like a shadow that grows the moment you try to outrun it. So what if the real problem was never your income? What if your brain was never built to feel rich, no matter what number sits in your account? Here's the part nobody tells you. Your brain doesn't measure money, it measures difference. It doesn't ask, do I have enough? It asks, do I have more than I did yesterday and more than the person next to me? That single design flaw explains almost everything about why more money rarely buys more peace. It's not a personal failure, it's not bad budgeting, it's not a discipline problem you can fix with a better app. It's a setting your ancestors installed a very long time ago, and nobody ever gave you the manual. You inherited the hardware. You just never got to read the instructions. Consider how strange this actually is. You can objectively be earning more than 90% of the people who have ever lived, with warm shelter, reliable food, and more physical safety than any king enjoyed 1,000 years ago. And still, some mornings you check your account and feel a small, sharp pang of not enough. That pang isn't irrational, it's not weakness. It's a signal firing exactly as intended, from a system built for a completely different world than the one you're living in now. Let's go back, not to your last paycheck, to the savanna. For most of human history, resources were scarce and visible. If your neighbor had more meat than you, that wasn't a minor inconvenience. It could mean the difference between your children eating and your children starving. In small tribal groups, everyone could see exactly what everyone else had. There was no hiding a surplus and no hiding a shortage either. So evolution built a constant background scanner into your brain, a scanner whose only job is comparison. Am I falling behind? Is someone else pulling ahead? Do I need to act now to close that gap? This scanner never sleeps, and it was never designed to say, "You're fine now, stop checking." A scanner that turned itself off would have gotten your ancestors killed. Psychologist Leon Festinger named this social comparison theory back in 1954, and decades of research since have confirmed something uncomfortable. Your sense of financial security isn't measured against some fixed number, it's measured against the people around you, whoever happens to be standing closest. Move to a wealthier neighborhood and suddenly your comfortable salary feels small. Nothing about your bank account changed, only your reference point did. Isn't that strange? The exact same income can feel like plenty in one zip code and like barely scraping by in another, just because the driveway next door has a nicer car in it. And here's where it gets even more uncomfortable. Researchers studying this effect have found that people often report being happier earning less, as long as they earn more than their immediate neighbors, than earning objectively more while everyone around them earns more still. Your brain isn't running a calculator, it's running a leaderboard. And on a leaderboard, your position matters more than your score, but comparison to others is only half the trap. The other half happens entirely inside your own timeline, with no other person involved at all. Psychologist Philip Brickman ran a now famous study in the 1970s comparing lottery winners to people who had recently become paraplegic after accidents. Two groups thrown to completely opposite ends of fortune within the same year. You'd expect the winners to be soaring and the accident victims to be devastated. And right after the event, that's exactly what happened. The winners glowed, the accident victims struggled. But months later, something unsettling emerged. The lottery winners had drifted back down toward their original baseline happiness, the same general mood they carried before the money ever arrived. The accident victims, tragically and remarkably, had drifted back up toward theirs. Humans, it turns out, adapt to almost anything, good or bad. This is called hedonic adaptation, and it means the joy of any financial win has an expiration date built in from the moment you receive it, ticking down before you've even finished celebrating. Think about your last big purchase, the new phone, the nicer car, the bigger apartment. Remember that first week? The thrill was real. You probably checked your new phone constantly just to admire it. to feel the weight of it, to notice how much smoother everything felt. But by week 3, it wasn't exciting anymore. It was just your phone, the one you check without thinking, the one that no longer registers as an upgrade at all. That's not you being ungrateful. That's your brain doing exactly what it evolved to do. It resets its baseline to match your new normal, filing the improvement away as the new default, and then it starts scanning for the next gap to close. There is always a next gap. That's the entire point of the mechanism. This is where economist Richard Easterlin's research becomes so important. In 1974, he discovered something that still puzzles economists today. As entire countries got wealthier over decades, average reported happiness barely moved. Individual raises felt good in the moment, a genuine short-term lift. But national prosperity, tracked across generations, didn't translate into a nation of noticeably happier people. GDP climbed, wages climbed. Life satisfaction, on average, mostly stayed flat. Researchers call this the Easterlin Paradox, and it's the macro version of exactly what's happening in your own bank account, just stretched across an entire population instead of one person's paycheck. More money, same restless feeling. Why would that be true at the scale of an entire economy? Because it was never really about the number in your account. It was about the gap your brain insists on maintaining, no matter how large the numbers on both sides of that gap grow. Raise your income and your brain quietly raises its own bar to match, almost instantly, almost invisibly. Psychologists call this the hedonic treadmill, and the name is almost too perfect. You run. The scenery never changes. The belt speeds up to match your pace, exactly the way a real treadmill does. You're working harder, earning more, staying later, saying yes to the extra project, and somehow standing in exactly the same emotional spot you started in. The finish line isn't far away, the finish line moves with you. Here's the twist that should genuinely surprise you. In 2010, Daniel Kahneman, a Nobel-winning psychologist, and economist Angus Deaton, published a landmark study analyzing data from over 450,000 Americans. They found that day-to-day emotional well-being does rise with income, but only up to a certain point. Beyond that point, more money kept increasing people's life satisfaction as a broad judgment, the story they tell themselves about how their life is going overall. But it stopped meaningfully increasing their actual daily happiness, the texture of an ordinary Tuesday, the mood they carried through an average afternoon. Read that again. Past a certain threshold, extra income can make you feel more successful on paper, while doing almost nothing for how you actually feel on a random Tuesday afternoon. Isn't that the opposite of what almost everyone assumes when they picture the next raise finally fixing things? It means two people can look identical on paper. Same income, same job title, same house. And one of them can be quietly anxious every day while the other feels calm and unhurried. The number never explained the difference. Something underneath the number did. So if money itself isn't the fix, what actually moves the needle? Research from psychologist Elizabeth Dunn and colleagues points somewhere unexpected. Spending on experiences rather than possessions produces longer-lasting satisfaction, largely because experiences resist comparison in a way objects don't. A new watch sits on your wrist, quietly inviting comparison to someone else's nicer watch, someone else's newer model, someone else's better deal. A trip you took becomes a story, woven into who you are, immune to being instantly outpriced by a stranger's bigger version. Nobody can one-up a memory the way they can one-up a car in a driveway. Your brain's comparison scanner has a much harder time attacking a memory than it does attacking a possession, because a memory doesn't sit still long enough to be measured against anyone else's. There's another lever, and it's even less obvious. Studies on giving behavior, including work by Dunn and behavioral scientist Michael Norton, found that people who spent money on others reported measurably higher happiness than people who spent the identical amount on themselves. Small amounts, not fortunes. A few dollars on a coffee for a stranger moved the needle more than the same few dollars spent on their own lunch. The mechanism isn't really about generosity as a virtue, though it happens to look that way from the outside. It's about briefly stepping outside the comparison loop entirely. For a moment, you're not asking, do I have enough compared to them? You're not scanning for a gap at all. You're doing something the scanner wasn't built to measure, and for a few minutes, the treadmill simply stops. Now think about your own life through this lens, that job you took for the bigger salary. The one that quietly made you less happy, even though the number on your paycheck went up. Was it really about the money, or was it about what that number represented to the people watching you, and to the version of yourself keeping score somewhere in the back of your mind? Your ancestors needed that scanner to survive a world of real scarcity, where falling behind could genuinely cost them everything. You're running the exact same software in a world of infinite comparison, algorithmic feeds showing you everyone else's highlight reel on an hourly basis, and a treadmill that never announces when you've won, because it was never built with a finish line in the first place. You cannot out-earn a moving target. That's the part worth sitting with. No number will ever feel like enough if your brain's job is to keep resetting what enough means the instant you arrive at it. Every raise buys you a few weeks of relief and then quietly recalibrates the baseline underneath you. The treadmill isn't broken, it's working exactly as designed, doing precisely what it was built to do 100,000 years before paychecks existed. The only real exit isn't a bigger paycheck, it's noticing the mechanism itself right as it fires, catching the pang of not enough before it turns into another purchase, another job change, another comparison you didn't choose to make, and choosing not to sprint after it one more time. So the next time you get that raise and the number looks bigger and the feeling still doesn't follow, remember this. You didn't fail to get rich. You succeeded at something else entirely. You kept your ancient scanner alive and running, exactly the way 10,000 generations before you needed it to run. The question was never how much you earn. The question is whether you ever let yourself stop scanning.